Girls, don't look left. Girls, don't look right. What was I, an innocent, impressionable, naive 15-year-old girl, to do? Well, of course, I did the very thing I should have done. I looked left. I looked right. And I soaked in the scene unfolding around me, knowing that this was a memory that would last forever. Where was I, you might ask? I was at the Evel Knievel Snake River Jump, happening on September 8th, 1974. Amazingly, this happened a mere 40 years ago this week. To put it in historical perspective, it was 1 year and 2 months after the Vietnam War had ended, and it was also the exact same day that Richard Nixon was pardoned for his involvement in the Watergate affair. Songs that were popular at the time, one of my personal favorites, The Streak by Ray Stevens. I bet there are many of you who remember that one. Or I Honestly Love You by Olivia Newton-John, which was popular the month of October of 1974. The thing is, America was at a place in its history where she was hungry for heroes. We needed people who could do something and do it big, and Evel Knievel stepped in to fill those shoes. So to really understand the legend that became Evel Knievel, you have to understand his childhood and the city that shaped him. Evel and I share the same hometown, Butte, Montana, a mining city in southwestern Montana, located just 8 miles from the Continental Divide. It was known as the richest hill on earth because of the copper ore discovered there, the very ore that helped us to win World War I, World War II, and it fueled the Industrial Revolution. Evel was born in 1938, and when he was coming up, it was a very rough and tumble town, still is, in fact. Lots of bars and brothels, brawls breaking out all around you, and there was a macho attitude that had to be developed if you were going to survive that mining culture. It went round the clock. I can still remember hearing the whistles blow at 8 a.m., 4 p.m., and midnight. And even the women could cuss like truck drivers. My grandmother was one of them. Butte is said to be a mile above sea level, which it is, and then the mine stretched a mile below the surface of the earth. So the saying goes, it's a mile high, a mile deep, and no one is on the level. That macho attitude became known as Butte tough, and that certainly is something that described Evel Knievel. When I was a cheerleader in 7th and 8th grade, it was reputed that we carried switchblades in our socks when we went to out-of-town games just in case our team lost. I will not share whether that's true or not. I'll let you ponder that one. So as you can see, between the very cold winters, we often suffered with 40 degrees below zero. You think the snow out there is something, well, live with a little bit of 40 degrees and you'll feel differently, below zero. So that Butte tough attitude is really something that Evel grew up with. As I said, he was born Robert Craig Knievel in 1938, just 1 year before my own father. My dad went to high school with Evel Knievel, and his high school sweetheart, soon-to-be wife, ended up going to high school with my mother. I remember growing up and looking forward to the Butte 4th of July parades, where Evel and his entourage would lead the parade. He would always have lots and lots of noise and wheelies and red, white, and blue vehicles that were displaying all of his collection of motorcycles. I also was a waitress at the Butte Country Club in high school. Evel's house was just across the golf course, and he always enjoyed a round of golf at least once or twice a week. So he would come in, and occasionally I'd get to be his waitress. I loved his stories, and I really loved that tip that he left me that was usually about 3 to 4 times the price of the sandwich that he had ordered. One of my favorite memories was when he called out the entire staff of the Butte Country Club to show off his shiny new toy, a golf cart. For those of you who remember Evel's performances, he was always dressed in an Elvis-inspired one-piece leather jumpsuit that was all blinged out with stars and stripes and red, white, and blue, a huge belt buckle. I wonder what that was telling us, with the letters EK on it for Evel Knievel, and his helmet had the number 1 on it. He always said that if you weren't the best at something, you were courting death. And in his business, that was true. So he always liked to brag and say that he was #1 at what he did. Well, no big surprise, his golf cart looked a lot like that leather jumpsuit. But it had one extra feature that we really enjoyed. He allowed us to press the button, and time after time, every time you pressed it, it would play a different patriotic song, like God Bless America. Because indeed, he was from Butte, America, and he was quite a patriotic fellow. Evil ended up being quite a hellraiser from the time he was born on. He was raised by his paternal grandparents, and he always liked to take risks. He was a lifetime risk taker. So he did things like play hockey, he jumped ski jumps, he even played in the rodeo, competed in the rodeo, and he eventually ended up starting a semi-pro hockey team, but that's another story I'll save for later. So the story goes that he got his name one night after a little bit of hell-raising. He got thrown in jail with his best friend. And it just so happened that his best friend, what a coincidence, had the last name of Knaufel. So guess what his name was? Awful Knaufel. So it was on that night when they were in the jail overnight trying to figure out how to spend the night. You know, it was a long night. And they were brainstorming, what should we do when we grow up? You know, what should we be? And Evil realized, I should adopt a name like your name, Awful Knaufel. I'm going to be Evil Knievel. But he did make a point to spell it a little differently. He did not want it to be E-V-I-L. He wanted it to be E-V-E-L because he wanted to communicate that he was not an evil person. Some people might argue with that, but that's another story. So Evil eventually dropped out of high school early, got married to that high school sweetheart I told you about, Linda, and started his family very young. He had a very hard time landing on a career choice because he didn't really want to waste his time on making money. He just wanted to ride motorcycles. But, you know, as it goes, we all have to make money, and he settled at first on going into the Army for a brief time. After that, he was a miner. He started in the Butte copper mines below the surface as a diamond drill operator, and then he got promoted to the surface where they had just started. We always had the underground mines that were marked by the gallows frames, just like in Leadville, Colorado. But in this case, we had just started to dig out an open pit mine that was known as the Berkeley Pit. So he was selected to drive this thing called an earth mover. It's this huge vehicle. And would you know that he got fired not too long afterwards because he pulled a wheelie with it, crashed into some power lines, and knocked the electricity out in the town for several hours. So as you can see, Evil never did things in a small or not dramatic way. He was all about the drama. He then went on to be an insurance salesman, and he always had I know. He had a pretty big idea of himself, and he thought he was really doing well at selling insurance. He even went so far as to sell some insurance policies to some mental patients in an institution. However, he went to the VP, or the president rather, and said, hey, I'm doing such a good job. Don't you want to promote me to vice president? And when the guy just didn't see it the way Evil did, he got mad and he quit. Now, I told you before about his hockey playing days and how he started a semi-pro hockey team. Well, he did start one and played in it as well, and it was called the Butte Bombers. Remember I talked about Butte tough? Well, those Butte Bombers, they were tough. But he also ended up getting in a snit about something on that and storming off and quitting that job as well. So he kind of had this history of doing those kinds of things. His next job was as an outfitter. His business was called Sure Kill, and it guaranteed the rich clients that came that they would certainly bag a wild game of their choice, an elk or something else like that, when he took them out hunting. As it turned out, he was actually poaching on Yellowstone lands, and he got in trouble for that. But he did not think it was fair that he couldn't go to Yellowstone and get those animals, so he hitchhiked to Washington, D.C. with a giant rack of antlers, hitchhiked across the country to talk to Congress into changing that rule and that law, and it did get changed. amazingly. A lot of those wild game got moved from those backlands of Yellowstone out to places where the hunters could be. So as you can see, Evil just tried different things and really didn't enjoy work until he landed on this idea. I just know I can make money by performing these daredevil stunts that I enjoy doing. So he moved to Moses Lake, Washington. He opened up a Honda dealership, and he started. His career spanned from 1966 until 1980. He had 81 jumps, his first one being jumping over a 4-foot box of rattlesnakes with 2 mountain lions. Bet you didn't hear about that one. One of his famous jumps, of course, was the Caesar Palace jump, when he jumped over the fountains and really crashed spectacularly. That's one thing about Evil. He didn't always get attention for his successes. It was his amazing crashes and the fact that he would get back up. He had his bones broken 433 times, and he's in the Guinness World Record book for that fact. So you can see how much tenacity and true grit he really had, and that really fueled his rise to stardom. Which leads us to the Snake River Jump. This was outside of Twin Falls, Idaho, September 8th, 1974. Evil hired our band and drill team to be bussed down to perform. First, we were to do the national anthem, and then to march to the edge of the cliff and do a routine on the way there. So, we are getting off the bus, and we only have a few chaperones, and they're starting to look around and take in the scene unfolding. Evil wanted this to be a family affair. He brought his wife and children, had his mom and dad flown in, but that's not who was attracted to this. It was 12,000, many of whom were wild partiers. Lots of chemical, drug and alcohol use going on. Hippies, I think we called them back in the day. And many of them were nude or partially nude. So now you understand why I wasn't supposed to look anywhere. There was a lot to see. Oh, it gets better. With that thought, I know what you're all thinking. Okay, so the big moments arrived. The first thing we see, without looking at all of the naked revelers, is this wooden scaffolding that's been built on a mound of dirt, and this sky cycle that's been developed by a NASA engineer is perched at almost a 90-degree angle. This is what is going to blast Evil 1 mile across the chasm of the Snake River Canyon. Do you know that it could go from 0 to 450 miles an hour in 3.5 seconds? Okay? So this was an amazing feat that he was undertaking. And truthfully, he didn't really think that he was going to live to tell the tale. So we get off the bus and we hear, "Girls, don't look left." So we look. And there is a whole bunch of folks smoking the wacky weed, something that those of us in Colorado know well. Not all of us, but some of us. Then it was, "Girls, don't look right." I swear there was a naked woman being tossed from one group to another, okay? So the thing about this event was that our high school, Butte High School, was really in its heyday at this time. We'd been asked to be in the Rose Bowl parade in a couple of months. And we had really practiced hard for this. And we had mini skirts and fishnet stockings. And we put Vaseline on our teeth so that our mouths wouldn't dry out. And I used Vaseline tonight so that my mouth wouldn't dry out. And it keeps drying out. I don't know what that's about. But and we had our wiglets on. And we had white vinyl go-go boots. I kid you not. So there we were, all ready to do our performance and march to the edge of the lip of the canyon. And as we started out, we knew we couldn't look left or right. So we were looking forward, and then we hear, "Girls, don't look forward." There's now a 300-pound guy who has literally dropped his Levi's and is marching in front of us, shining his full moon the whole way. So at long last, we reach the edge of the cliff, and Evil is by a crane. He's taken in a cage where he's seated, and he is lowered into the sky cycle. And the countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And what happens? Many of you might remember. He did not make it to the other side. The parachute deployed prematurely because of an electronic malfunction. The winds were such that he was pulled back into the canyon. The crowd, curious to know what happened, pushed forward. And now our chaperones are saying, "Girls, hit the deck, grab elbows." We all were truly in fear for our lives. All we could see, there was a temporary fence erected that we were going to be pushed over the cliff by those 12,000 druggies behind us. So as it turned out, we did not go over the cliff, and all of us were on the ground, as emotional teenagers will do, sobbing, thinking evil was dead. But we weren't the only ones. There were a lot of really upset people, a lot of people thinking he wasn't going to survive this crash. What we didn't know is as he was going down, he was cutting himself out of the parachute, or not the parachute, the harness that he was in, because he knew that if he happened to go in the water, and the Snake River, if you've been to that canyon, is quite wide. If he would have gone in the water, he would have probably drowned. The fact of the matter is he went almost directly under where the sky cycle was. He was deployed, and then the winds pulled him back, and he was on the cliff side, not in the water, almost directly under that scaffolding where the sky cycle had started. Evil lived to tell the tale. We were all assured that Evil had survived, and we were all loaded back on the bus for a very anticlimactic ride home. So in the end, Evel Knievel did not die on a motorcycle. He died from pulmonary fibrosis in November of 2007. Matthew McConaughey eulogized him, and he said everybody thought Evel Knievel had a death wish. No, I disagree. He had a life wish. He wanted to live life big. There's a saying by Hunter S. Thompson, who lived about the same time as Evel, ironically. He was a journalist. And I think it's something that I think of when I think of Evel Knievel. He certainly could have spoken these words. That life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely and with an attractive and well-preserved body. In fact, it should be a slide in sideways with a cigarette in one hand and a glass of wine in the other, with the body thoroughly used up and worn out, screaming, "Woohoo! What a ride!"